G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far that you are also having a fantastic weekend. Now boys, I'm known a lot as maybe a pessimistic doomer reporter. I would put just as an ultra realist, but anyway, I'm known to see the MDCOA, of course the most dangerous course of action or the worst case scenario. So then you can develop actions to then counter that. And what we have seen today is even out of what I thought would be the most wildest dreams of how this conference could go between President Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President JD Vance. So of course that is going to be the main part of the video that we look at. So we're going to be talking about that, reactions to it from Europe, from Ukraine, from America, to some opinions, what was said, what we can read into it, where things go from here now that that deal is potentially just completely off the table. But also, if anyone cares for today, we will be looking at the end at maps, geolocations, and comparing maps, and as per usual, some weapon systems entering the battlefield as well. But like I said, this went worse than I think even I could imagine, and I reckon Putin is somewhere sitting in his villa going, holy shit, that's worse than even we thought, or better for me too. So it's very hard to know. But remember, with Trump, I think some of the best way you can approach him is look at what he does, not what he says. But with this, like everything, people take a snippet. And I believe that people are watching the blow up in the final 10 to 15 minutes of this conference. They're not looking at the conference as a whole of the 45 to 50 minutes of it. And if you watch the whole thing, you will get a very different impression. Absolutely. So we'll go over that, and I've written down chronologically as things occur as well, and how we see emotions get into it. Now, these clips that we're seeing float around, they give the impression, in my opinion, of a Trump and JD Vance ambush. And if you watch the whole thing, I don't believe that this is the case. I believe that Zelensky made a historical diplomatic blunder. And there's a few reasons for this. One, it was for the minerals deal, which is now off the table, but focusing on all these other bits and pieces, and also then trying to carry out, I guess, diplomacy in a public forum like this before the meeting has even started, which of course we saw JD get fired up about. But I think the reason, or one of the reasons Zelensky has made such a blunder so publicly, and this got so fiery, was this was really, at least in my knowledge, the first conference where Zelensky has really been pushed, and pushed by a powerful nation and by an ally, and pushed by those who want peace at basically any cost, that they don't want more war or these idealistic dreams of beach parties in Crimea like seemingly all of the European leaders. And this is a real first that we've seen proper pushback on that from someone with the power to really change things around. Not the hand shandy-a-thon that the European leaders have been having for 3 years based on virtue signalling and emotion rather than maybe realities, while many, many tens or if not hundreds of thousands of young men have tragically perished on the front line. So we're going to go over all of this, of course. And where I want to start, is US aid. I said stayed because I was reading US aid at the time. Now, what Trump has said is basically that Zelensky, if he doesn't come to the table, he will be on his own. And I think a lot of people don't realise what this would actually look like. So let's talk about what was said, and let's talk about some bits that not many are talking about that are absolutely critical. It's also very funny to me to see a lot of American YouTubers just go ballistic at Trump-Vance presidency or administration over the past month, when 100% they definitely voted Republican. So let's look at this.
Either we're going to end it or let him fight it out. And if he fights it out, it's not going to be pretty. Because without us, he doesn't win. Let me tell you.
So that was after the press conference that, well, we'll let him fight it out if he wants that without an end. And it's not going to be pretty. And we have seen this. We have seen Zelensky to European leaders say over the past 3 years that without American support, this would not go well very quickly. But it's a lot more than just weapons. I think the weapons are actually the least of the worries when it comes to this. This was, of course, during the conference.
Maybe he did. I don't know what happened, but he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal...
Sign a deal or we're out, and you do not have the cards.
You're in a much better position, but you're not acting at all thankful.
So you'll be in a better position if you have some sort of deal. Now, I see so many speaking like this, and this is just an example. Europe needs to step up, massive military rearmament. Now, I see, of course, a lot of this. And I agree, Europe should have, years ago, stepped up, and they need to further step up for their own security. But I believe European leaders are more interested in rhetoric and their words winning than sheer industrial output. Europe does not have and has not taken the steps towards the industry needed to fight an attritional, protracted war without the US. And I believe, this is unpopular, but I believe they have also not shown the will, regardless of their words, regardless of what the leader of X or Y country has said, whether it is from France to Estonia. I don't care what they say. I care about what they do. And have they acted in a way, not at the podium with the microphone, have they acted in a way as if this war was existential to themselves? No, they have not. And we see pieces like this from the EU's High Representative, Kaja Kallas, who, of course, is Estonian. Ukraine is Europe. We stand by Ukraine. We will step up our support to Ukraine so that they can continue to fight back the aggressor. Today it became clear that the free world needs a new leader. It's up to us Europeans to take this challenge. Now, what I will say is if America isn't the leader of the free world, or if America isn't the leader just of the world, Europe is not in second, third, or probably fourth place at this time. And of course, you can read a lot into this, that the free world needs a new leader, that we need a new leader other than Trump. It needs to be us, okay? And we need to step up our support. Why wasn't that stepped up then years ago? We knew this is likely what was going to happen as soon as Trump put his name on that ballot. We knew how it looked. But we need to step up European support. Now, so many people, too many people, are focused on weapons, tanks and bullets and guns. And what I'll say is, I don't really think that is what Ukraine loses from America pulling out. It's United States intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. The second largest in the world is the US, second to China on the front, at least, of surveillance. But they're one of the largest in the world, and some of the best in the world of actually interpreting that information as well from all battle spaces, from legitimately space, as I've put this photo, down to people on the ground, down to planes flying high in the air, to drones flying over the Black Sea. The amount of this going in to fire HIMARS, to fire ATACMS, to fire Storm Shadows, to fire Scalps. I don't care if those systems are UK and France. What do they work off? Well, a lot of the imagery is going to be off that what I've shown on the screen and who owns GPS. And I believe if the US pull all of this, it doesn't matter about further military aid. Like it matters, and it's a huge psychological impact on the soldiers. But what I think is the most is that the ISR will then just be taken away. And I believe Ukraine is in for a very rude shock of that instantly. You'd see that affect the battlefield. And what I will say is if that happens, Russian missiles are about to be far, far more effective. This will limit electronic warfare. It will limit a whole range of things. So don't focus on the sexy tanks and guns and F-16s. Focus on those more soft assets that are the huge advantage the US gives to the European states, regardless of what the European states give. Regardless of that, at the end of the day, without those other softer assets, the hard assets, now that the West has gone really into the technological space, fucking strap yourselves in. Starlink, look at that. Starlink gets cut off, say. There is no encrypted communications. WhatsApp, Signal, whatever, is down to Kyivstar SIM cards, which we know Russian all-land drones can see Kyivstar SIM cards on the front line. Instantly, because Ukraine has not gone fibre optic route, they've gone the more machine learning route, most of your drones are then God, null and void on the front line. Bad thing. Focus more on the soft, I'd say. But let's look at some of the responses that have happened here. And of course, we'll look at Zelensky and Trump, but some huge swings as well. Now, Senator Lindsey Graham, who is known as one of the biggest supporters of Ukraine and wants, and I agree with this here, basically wants direct war with Russia. He has come out and said, well, Zelensky from Ukraine basically needs to resign over his behaviour in the White House, which is, of course, a huge change. So let's listen to what he says.
So, what I think, complete, utter disaster. I've been to Ukraine 8 or 9 times since the war started. I understand the consequences of Putin's actions against Ukraine. I appreciate what the Ukrainian people have done. They fought like tigers. At the end of the day, I was hoping that this minerals deal, which would be transformative in the relationship, would go over well. I talked to Zelensky this morning. Don't take the bait. President Trump was in a very good mood.
So Trump's in a good mood. Don't take the bait if there's some hard questions.
Last night, somebody asked me, am I embarrassed about Trump? I have never been more proud of the president. I was very proud of J.D. Vance.
So he's proud of them.
Standing up for our country. We want to be helpful. What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again. I think most Americans saw a guy that they would not want to go in business with.
So we don't know if we can do business with Zelensky again. It basically continues to say he either needs to send someone we can work with or resign. And there's a lot of calls around this. So let's look then at all the European leaders and how then they have responded to this. Now, there's been a mass pouring, and Zelensky's been resharing all of this of all the European leaders, and a lot of leaders all at the same time. I'm sure it wasn't, directed at all, but all at the same time tweeted the support for Ukraine. And of course, Zelensky has then supported this. And as well, Boris Johnson has written about this as well, that they're playing the same role and all of this, that it needs to continue the fight basically and move forward. Minerals deal will be signed, but the path to peace still, we know Boris Johnson believes in peace through strength idea, at least that narrative at this point in time. But what I'll say is I think Boris in the future will try and save his arse a bit because he scuttled a more favourable peace agreement. And since then, 500,000 men, $300 billion have sadly, very tragically, basically gone into the ground in Ukraine. And I think history and society will hold this, what happened in the early days of 2022, as catastrophic if it ends up in even a worse position, which is looking likely than it could have been back then and saved, I don't know, I think 500,000 may be low on the figures. So let's look at what then Zelensky has said. Thank you, America. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the visit. Thank you, POTUS, Congress, American people. Ukraine needs a just and lasting peace. We're working exactly for that. But again, that's not the meeting about. The meeting was about the minerals deal. But Trump has said this, and this is vastly different from the more political reply Zelensky gave. Statement from President Donald J. Trump. We had a very meaningful meeting at the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion. And I have determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him a big advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage. I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. And what we have heard is that he was basically kicked out of the White House, at least allegedly. Some say he left, some say he was kicked out, but we know that he wasn't present in the White House much long after this. And that minerals agreement is not only off the table, it looks like it's been off the table into the bloody bin. With, of course, headlines like this: Zelensky leaves White House without signing minerals deal after Oval Office blow up. And down to this being reported by Reuters as well. We've been reporting the Ukrainian president left the White House on Friday without signing a much-touted rare earth deal with the US. Reuters news agency, citing unnamed White House official, is reporting that Trump is not interested in reviving the minerals deal, that it's out. That same official claimed the Ukrainian delegation began begging to sign the deal after being told to leave the White House following the leader's argument in front of reporters. So it looks like that is not only off the table, that it's just gone completely. And this divide I spoke about between Europe and America, the divide I've spoken about for a very long time now, about more traditionalist, conservative, whatever you want to call it, and maybe progressive postmodernist states are going to divide further and further, or bring together too. So I think we're going to see a relationship between America and Hungary, Slovakia, potentially Romania, and Poland maybe flourish more, and others divide and divide. And what I spoke about, and people called me a propagandist for it, is could we see America with some of their principles end up maybe actually aligning more closely with maybe Russia or some Eurasian powers there, more so than Western Europe? So let's go over what was said, and then we'll look at some opinions about this, because a lot of the opinions people have formed is because they have watched 10 minutes. They have watched cuts. They haven't listened to the whole thing. Go and listen to it at 1.5 times speed. It'll take you 20 minutes. Okay, so let's go over this here. Trump talking about ceasefire.
So long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying.
So saying that you don't have the cards, and we have spoken about this, at this point in time, who has the cards on the table? It is Russia. They do have the cards on the table, and Ukraine does have critical manpower problems, which Trump talks about. Now, one thing I will say with Trump is he will have access to far more information and classified information than any of us have. And what I did say is when we saw Trump enter office and his opinion of this war seemingly switched very quickly, you could say, as Zelensky's claimed, that Trump is a victim of Russian disinformation or propaganda. Okay, that's A. It could be that. On B column, could it be that now Trump has got back into power and then has access to this classified information and the real American intelligence reports? He goes, holy shit, this is looking really bad. These are the actual losses and manpower figures. And if there's, like he says, if there's a piece on the table, Trump believes that Zelensky should take it. Now, this is a few minutes long. There's a lot more in this. This is when things really started to blow up.
But he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, GD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines.
So this is what we'll talk about in a sec, is it was all pretty much good until this point, until Zelensky tried to litigate, I guess, in front of the media. This is why you need to watch the first 30 minutes, as it was jovial, they were laughing around. Next thing, it really changed when this occurred, and more where JD and Trump were talking about the previous administration, and then Zelensky tried further litigation in that.
Because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
But it is known there are critical manpower problems, which I think are underreported at best.
I have been to...
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people...
So people are saying in that what was said. Now, some are saying Zelensky at this point called him a bitch. Again, I can't confirm that, but again, it's an interesting tactic if you're going to call the vice president of the most powerful country in the world. But we will see. But we can see even just body language off this of how uncomfortable Zelensky is in this and how he vehemently does not agree with what then Mr. Trump and Vance are saying.
Propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean. And
this is where it goes really bad when he brings up everyone have problems, even you will have problems. After the meeting went from Trump, Vance, whatever, we want to get this minerals deal going, blah, 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 we'll go and sign this after this, to all this talk about more money and peace guarantees and as far as security guarantees as well.
Don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have
a
war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on
position
this
to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this.
what
I'm not
You're in
dictating.
no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influenced.
We're going to feel
I'm-
very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the
bad
very
position,
beginning
and
of
he
the
happens
war.
to be right about
From
it.
the very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position.
I
You don't
was
have
in-
the cards right now. With us, you start
I'm
having
not playing
cards. But
cards.
right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
Yeah, you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
So Trump getting at, if you are on our side and we are negotiating this with America on board, you have cards. Because America, of course, has massive global influence. But without America, you don't have any cards on the table. And that is true if America step away. As I showed you, the remaining cards, a lot of them get taken away and Europe cannot backfill them.
I'm very serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives of
involved.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What you-
III.
what you
You're
speaking
gambling
about?
with
What you
World
speaking
War
about?
III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country.
So saying that you are gambling with World War III. What you are gambling with, Trump is saying, is you're gambling with the war expanding. And not only that, that wouldn't just expand inside Ukraine. Next thing, you're dealing with a war on a global scale, as Trump will say, a third world war. So he's saying you are gambling with that by wanting to continue this and refusing to step into any sort of negotiation or diplomatic actions. But Zelensky's pushback is, well, then we need some level of security guarantees. What Trump says in this is, yeah, but the first part of this, and Zelensky agrees with this on Fox News, the first part is that minerals deal, so we actually have cards and money to then start moving things around.
This country,
I'm
it's
with
back
all
to
respect to
you
your
far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once? This
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
you said thank
Even
you.
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States
what
of
you're speaking
America
about.
and the president who's trying to save your country.
See, this is the thing, that America, the president trying to save your country. And I've thought about this, is you think the situation's bad now. The situation with Harris may actually even be worse. I think likely it would be worse. Trump at the moment, en masse in a lot of Western states, is seen as betraying Ukraine. But I think history may look back as actually saving as well, at least in those initial months and years, absolutely. But also, we don't know the actual situation on the ground. I think historians may look back and go, look, at the beginning of 2025, throughout 2024, Russia gained a huge advantage in manpower and weapons and industry. And then Trump stepping in, making even a bad peace. The bad peace is even better than a good war, because can Ukraine realistically, militarily win from here? Maybe he's saving the remaining 80%.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
No,
answer?
no,
Can
you've
I
done a
answer?
lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this.
I
You have a damn good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only in
alone.
this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
We gave
for
you
your
military equipment.
You
And you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me.
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
Okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
A lot of that actually came from American intelligence and think tanks as well, that it would be a few days.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I know you do.
Just say thank you.
And they get at this too, that it's going to be very hard to do business like this if this is the way where you were starting, your starting point and how you see Putin. It's going to be very hard to get anywhere on this. We hear Trump speaking.
I said a lot of times to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this story so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell
Then you tell us,
So saying that you don't have the cards, there are many, many people dying, and you're not appreciative enough of the support that the US has given and the option on the table, I guess, for the deal around minerals as well, even if that is some level, I guess, of extortion. But is there any other chance at this point in time? It's a horrible, horrible situation. But at this point, what I've said is, if you are Zelensky and your main partner, the partner you need is America, at the end of the day, if America says jump, you start jumping and ask if you're going high enough. It may not be fair. War is not fair. And this is where I believe that Europe is falling apart, is all of their diplomacy and world order is seen on what is seen as principle or fair and ethics. And what I'm saying is a lot of the world believe that their principles, ethics and morals are as concrete in their eyes as yours are, but then again, they will not win wars. Just because you exert publicly that you are this moral figure, firstly, does Putin give a shit about that? And does an artillery shell landing somewhere give a shit about that either? And that's where Europe has been focused, and the appreciation of, obviously from that we see that Trump advance feel like that there has not been enough appreciation given for the hundreds of billions of dollars, or at least they claim 350 billion, that has been given to Ukraine to help the country survive up until this point. So let's look at a couple of opinions on this first. Now, this is from a gentleman who I actually don't follow, but I saw this, I read it, and I thought I really, really agree with this. And it's along the line with Konstantin Kisin as well, what he says. I watched the entire press conference with Zelensky. There was 40 minutes of discussion up to the argument. Most people saw at most the last 10 minutes. The whole video gives the proper context. When I watched the argument without the proper context, I thought it was possible that Trump and Vance ambushed Zelensky or were even trying to humiliate himself. That's not what happened. You had 40 minutes of calm conversation. Vance made a point that didn't attack Zelensky and wasn't even addressed to him. It was addressed to the previous administration, and Zelensky clearly started the argument. In the first 40 minutes, Zelensky kept trying to go beyond what was negotiated in the deal. When Trump was asked a question, it was always, we'll see. Zelensky made blanket assertions that there would be no negotiating with Putin and that Russia would pay for the war. When Trump said that it was a tragedy that people on both sides were dying, Zelensky interjected that the Russians were the invaders. For his part, Trump made very clear the US would continue delivering military aid. All Zelensky had to do was remain calm for a few more minutes and they would have signed a deal. It would have looked very different right now. And I honestly think the future of Ukraine may have been decided in that room right then by Zelensky. The argument started when Trump pointed out that it would be hard to make a deal if you talk about Putin the way Zelensky does. Words like terrorist, killer, whatever. Whether you believe that or not, whether you're in agreement or disagreement, it doesn't matter when we're speaking about where Trump wants to sit in the middle of this. He's saying that's going to be very difficult to negotiate from that point in time. Vance interjects and makes a reasonable point that Biden called Putin names, and that didn't get us anywhere. Again, name-calling, rhetoric, doesn't actually get you anywhere. The Zelensky-Trump dynamic was calm and stable. It was when Vance spoke that Zelensky started to interrogate him. Throughout the press conference to that point, everyone was making their arguments directly to the audience. Zelensky decided to challenge Vance and ask him hostile questions. He went back to his point that Putin never sticks to ceasefires, once again implying that negotiations are pointless. Why on earth would you do this? Then came the fight, as we all saw, but also in that ceasefire, the breaking of it. But we also need to talk about as well the comments made in August 2019 about retaking areas like Crimea, also whilst ceasefires were in place. Zelensky was minutes away from being home free, and he would have had the deal, the new commitments from Trump administration, and of course, that's the very beginning framework of that peace settlement process and security guarantees from the US, because it secures the US's investment. The point Vance made was directed against Biden and the media, taking them to task for speaking in moralistic terms. This offended Zelensky, and that began the argument. I've been a fan of Zelensky up to this point, but this showed so much incompetence, if not emotional instability, that I don't see how he recovers from this. That goes into my point before about this is the first time in a conference on a very large scale he was pushed by those who aren't just giving out hand shandies and all hail here. It is seen as pushing back on it, and now we've seen the reaction to it, and no one's done that for years. Probably the most was, who was that? The Joe Rogan's mate, Lex Friedman, and we saw how that went. No one even listened to it. The relationship with the administration is broken. Ukraine should probably go with a new leadership at this point, as per we saw Lindsey Graham say, and that relationship is in tatters. And I don't know if that will be recovered, knowing the sort of people that Vance and Trump at least are publicly. Now, Konstantin Kisin says this. Now, firstly, let's look at what he pinned down here. Of course, Konstantin Kisin, he pushed back very recently against Trump calling Zelensky a dictator, saying that it was, of course, Putin who's the dictator. That's what he said. He said, I find it amusing that people accuse me of changing my mind due to audience capture and other nonsense. I'm literally the most disagreeable person on this platform. A week ago, I was arguing with Elon about this. Number 2, I've been pro-Ukraine since day one. Many people who follow me have hated that from day one. I haven't given a single fuck since that day. Truth is truth. Zelensky messed this up bad, and I hope for the sake of Ukraine, he can find a way to claw this back. So this is what he said. My initial reaction to the Trump-Zelensky spat was based on the short clip. I've had a chance to watch the entire 53-minute press conference with Zelensky and Trump. It is painful, but I take back what I said earlier. Zelensky decided to attack Vance unnecessarily. He totally messed this up. Vance played to the gallery afterwards, but he was also correct. Litigating this stuff in front of media was really dumb. Really poor from Zelensky. I hope he can see sense, apologise and get a deal for his country. This was not smart. And will Zelensky actually apologise? Well, we'll talk about this in a second, but in this Fox News interview after this, Zelensky asked whether he owes Trump an apology, which was the very first question. Zelensky does not answer this. So let's go over little bits and pieces that I saw in this. No, so what it starts with, it starts talking about deals to be signed and Trump expressing his respect for Zelensky and the soldiers of Ukraine, despite insisting that the fighting must stop. Zelensky then speaks about security guarantees, but firmly states there will be no compromises with, quote, a terrorist, a killer. And Trump later references this point. This is the point we speak about, where if you, Trump says, with the way you're seeing Putin, what you're saying, it's going to be very, very hard to negotiate with this. Zelensky also notes that the United Kingdom and France won't be ready, later admitting that European guarantees will never be strong enough without the US due to internal divisions in Europe. Trump expresses excitement over the rare earth deals, calling it an incredible deal for Ukraine. The conversation, it starts off very friendly and very jovial. At 19 minutes and 13 seconds, Trump speaks about the loss of life and the impact on families, regardless of which side they are on, speaking about the families and the parents, of course, of lost young men in Ukraine. This angers Zelensky, who responds, you can see that it angers him, who says, well, they came to our territory. And what Trump is saying, well, I'm in the middle here, I just want people to stop dying. When asked about concessions, Trump makes it clear that both sides will have to make them, but insists that Ukraine's won't be as significant, so their concessions won't be as significant as many expect. He even discusses the potential for US peacekeepers after the war. Now, just a side note from myself in this, I honestly believe, and the longer this goes on, I'm more on this side, I honestly believe that a lot of these supporters and a lot of these politicians are happy to fight to the death of the final Ukrainian as long as they don't have to admit any sort of wrongdoing or then have an ego hit. I honestly believe they are willing to fight that it could be 80% occupied and everything falling apart, and I'd still be going, no, it's only peace through strength, and it's this, and it's that, and it's only this, that they are willing to throw millions of people into the grinder for their own views and egos, their idealistic visions, rather than maybe what is realistic right now on the front line. And Zelensky himself has said militarily, Ukraine cannot take back this land, and it keeps moving in the wrong direction. The front line's moving, but it's not growing blue. But says that there may not be as significant. He even discusses the potential for US peacekeepers after the war with, of course, in line with some of the European states. Those European states, they'll only deploy them if the US has backing. Now, of course, a lot of this after that spat, Trump doesn't strike me as someone who would really turn back and accept an apology straight off the bat and go, yep, I've completely changed my opinion. J.D. Vance criticises the failures of the previous administration. This is what Kisin was talking about, prompting Zelensky to bite back. He even took a jab at Trump's 2016 administration. Trump then pushes back and says, well, no, Obama gave you sheets, I gave you javelins. Zelensky speaks of ceasefires, but back in 2019 in August, they also stated that Crimea would be returned to Ukraine, and we know that the cogs started turning much faster at that point. Trump then declares, you're not acting at all thankful, and that's not a nice thing. I'm dead serious when I say this. Zelensky, who is used to conferences being dominated by idealistic rhetoric, and only the most supportive press or leaders have those discussions, he was visibly shocked when someone actually pushed back. And I believe that crack is what we saw under the pressure. And this crack under pressure may have sealed Ukraine's fate. And I don't know how this is going to go from here. Now, this was something in here. Now, this is nitpicky, but I believe it's still something because, of course, optics matter, especially for Ukraine in a very informational-driven war. Optics matter. And Piers Morgan calls this absurd. Elon Musk doesn't wear a suit in the Oval Office, he says. But this is being shared. A reporter asks Zelensky, why don't you wear a suit? You're in the highest level of this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Do you own a suit? A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting this office. Now, this has been laughed off. Whatever even Trump said, I like your outfit. But I actually agree with this, and I have commented on this for some time. Zelensky has visited the most powerful people in the world and the most powerful rooms in the world, asking for tens or hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars from those countries, wearing a T-shirt and cargo pants in a military-esque costume. Now, even I, as a small YouTuber, I made the switch to more respectful clothing due to the nature of events that I speak about. It's very sensitive, and of course, it is really, really important that we pay every respect to those who are actually fighting and to try and give a level of professionalism too. So I actually believe the optics here, not to be understated as well, because it's become a bit of a fucking meme. Now, straight after this, Zelensky then had an interview on then Fox News. Now, the question was, do you want an apology? And there's no answer in this. It was filibustering only. Now, in this, I've done rough quotes of Zelensky and also at least what the question was about, somewhat summarised, but was the effect of, I will say. Man said today that it was about minerals. To get this signed and then move on to guarantees. And it was about minerals. Zelensky said, well, I said we have to sign this, and this will be a step to security guarantees. But of course, now it looks like that is off the table. We'll see. We'll see what tomorrow brings. Then asks, do you think the public spat served Ukrainians well today? He says, I don't think it's good for both sides. What I will say is, well, America does hold all the cards in this. Trump is trying to maneuver himself into a position where he holds all of the cards, whether it's by discrediting Ukraine or by sanctioning Russia. But it sure as hell a lot worse for Ukraine than it is America, because America, well, they can just pull out. What can Ukraine do to the same effect on America? Of course, that's what Trump was getting at when he's saying, like, no, don't you tell me how it's going to be here. He says, I can't change Ukrainian attitudes toward Russia, of course, about the way some of the language used. It doesn't mean we don't want peace. We just want to recognise the reality and speak about of security guarantees, reality, but I think a lot of people need to recognise reality. Now, he says, Trump is convinced that you will never sign a deal with Putin. Is he right? He says, no. It's about just and lasting peace. And in negotiations, we have to be strong. When you're ready for peace, we have to be in a strong position. But this is where I think Trump is going, and why this answer too is somewhat filibustering is, well, are you ready to sign a deal on the situation on the ground at the moment? And my answer to that would be no, Ukraine is not. Where Putin and Trump are and where Zelensky and Europe is sitting is so far apart, I don't see any real happy medium ground being met in the middle. He then shows a video of Trump that we showed you talking about then, well, he'll have to continue fighting without us, the very first video we showed you after the meeting. And he asked, would you return to the White House? Zelensky says, no, we want peace. I'm here for the mineral deals. I just can't stop. I just can't say stop to the soldiers on the front line. Of course, that mineral deal got turned away because of what blew up in then the conference. He asked, can Ukraine hold off Russia without US support? It'll be difficult for us. This is why I'm here. No, Ukraine cannot hold off Russia without US support. I don't give a shit about weapons. I showed you the soft systems. That's more important. Are you prepared to step down for a peace deal? He says, I was already ready to step down. I'm not sure if it's a good idea. With all respect to Lindsay, only Ukrainians vote for their president. So he talks about, he shows the video of Lindsey Graham saying it was Ukrainian President Zelensky needs to step down. And then says, well, Americans vote for the American president, Ukrainians vote for their president. But there might be a little bit of a question mark in this if you're on Trump's team saying, well, no, Ukrainians did vote for you in, but at this point in time, no, you are at this point, due to martial law and the law in your constitution, you are not an elected official at this point in time. And America they want elections. Of course, Putin wants elections because it will benefit that, even just drawing that out. He asks then, do you think that the confrontation in the White House was pre-planned? As many will say, it was an ambush. He says, I don't know. And I don't believe that it was, especially with what we saw before, as many are looking at the clips, not at the entire thing. Trust me, it's a Saturday. You have an hour or half an hour to watch this through. Shouldn't this dynamic be behind closed doors? Do you regret that? And he says, yes, I think that it was not good, that being public, and what Vance says about litigation in front of the media. But of course, that can be a tactic too, because of course the media is all on one side, or dramatically all on one side. And we've seen how they've eaten this up. And of course, this is an informational war. What are the next steps? Well, the US wants this deal. We want to know what security guarantees. And again, this is what Zelensky was getting at that was annoying Trump and Vance, was the US wants a deal. They want this mineral, they want this and that, but Zelensky was pushing more and more and like, well, we need security guarantees, we need Russia to pay this, that. And I think what was frustrating Trump was it was like, yes, but we need to get this done before we move on to that. And Zelensky was stuck on those ideas, as per I showed you in this part in here, going beyond what was negotiated in the deal. What are the next steps? Oh, sorry, we went over that. Can your relationship with Trump be salvaged after today? He says, yes, of course. Historical reasons between our countries, and that we are thankful for the people, your people, that saved our people. And at the end of the day, there does need to be appreciation that without American dollars, that Europe would not have supported Ukraine in the way that it did. Without American support, Europe would not have been as supportive. They could not have been as supportive. And the American taxpayers did save this invasion, honestly, from being far worse than it looks like at the moment, even if some are trying to make it even worse. And I think history will look back on some of these leaders currently and go, you're in a situation where it was looking very, very bad and you kept pushing because you didn't want to take the political or even ego hit. Okay, now remember, I think the problem with Europe is that all truth is relative to experience or emotion rather than there's subjective truths, rather than this objective reality that some are seeing. Now, you can split this into left or right or however, but I believe that it's a growing problem everywhere over a billion different topics. I believe it's the biggest thing facing the Western world is this inability to identify objective truths rather than subjective truths. I think it's our biggest thing facing us. Forget China. I think it's that. Now, let's move on to the map. So, of course, we have Ukraine in the center of the screen, the capital Kyiv, the red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now, we don't have a deep state map update today, but I do have a few maps to show you. Now, a bit of footage here as well, if anyone is still on the video. Now, this is a very interesting piece of footage. Now, this was actually put up by AMK Mapping. He shared this. I've seen this over a number of Russian pages. Now, the Russian pages are claiming that it struck a SBU area in Zaporizhia. Now, I can't say if it did or not, but what I'm interested in this footage, what I show this footage for, is this is an FPV drone working in Zaporizhia, which Zaporizhia is a minimum of about 34 kilometers away. If we go into center here, minimum of about 34 clicks away from the front line. But of course, these are going to be operating back here somewhere. So you're seeing like 40 Ks away, FPV drones acting. And we can draw everything from then the range, the extended range, repeaters, as well as electronic warfare into question here. And again, I think, and this I've spoken about recently, I think keep an eye down in here because Russia is showing all the sort of signs to want to take more ground in here. So we see FAB strikes on Zap, we see FPV strikes on Zap, and then this geolocation right here at Stepove. So I'll show you where this is. It's Stepove. We see there's a road that kinks out around here. So right where my cursor is here, what we see on this video that was out overnight was that Russian forces have hit this area with both FAB glide munitions, and they've also hit then with TOS. And we're going to talk more about TOS, but thermobaric multiple launch rocket systems, potentially TOS 1 or 2, but probably TOS 2 given some of the range and location. But you can see here of them just raining down in this area and the hell on earth that TOS then creates, as well as then other munitions landing. I believe these are then FABs here on this area. And that's why I say that paint by numbers that Russia tend to do of FABs, TOS and movement, keep an eye on here. And what we believe is that Ukraine, with the minerals, now maybe it's changed to this point, but there's a lot of minerals down and around this area. There's huge lithium areas around Kyiv. Now, that it seems like due to this, that Russia has gone, well, we're going to take back militarily Kursk. So the idea of a leverage card at the table of Kursk has gone. Now Ukraine is trying to prevent movements to take more minerals by the Russian forces and are redeploying forces down here. So maybe we'll see more fighting around here. But I said about TOS. So we'll come up into the Pokrovsk direction and we're looking for Seledov. So Seledov is some from the front line at the closest area. Let's go about 8 kilometers. Now, some are saying JDAM. I don't know exactly what, but there was a cache of TOS that has exploded in here in spectacular fashion. Of course, or TOS, at least the munitions, of course, the rockets, the thermobarics. You can see this blowing up here. Sorry, I'll skip past this bit. So massive fireworks display of this and cook-off of other weapon systems. It would be very fucking bright. The sun would have come out of the front line for a little bit. Now, what I was saying here, I believe this is important because what we haven't seen is we haven't seen TOS landing in Pokrovsk, which doesn't surprise me because typically once it's enveloped war and Russia controls the flanks, then at that point they'll hit with TOS because currently it's more FABs and FPV. But that cache, at least one of them, has seemingly been hit in there. Okay, so while we're in this area, let's go talk about Velyka Novosilka. We saw this movement around to Privilene and Berlatsky yesterday. Let's have a quick look on the Suryak, and of course, movement made out from Novosilka. Down here, we can see this intersection on the road, so further westerly push as far and further northerly push, capturing areas as well, control over this area as well, so increasing that buffer zone. And that is why we say areas that fall are important, because once Vuhledar fell, 25 kilometres then fell. Once Velyka Novosilka went, 6 or 8 kilometres have then fallen. So before we talk too much about the south, I want to go into the north because, remember, war is like an organism. It's somewhat holistic that you push here and something happens over there. It doesn't happen in just a vacuum isolated event. Let's have a look at Kursk. Now, again, Russian army made new advances northwest of Starostinaya and completely recaptured Lebedivka. So these areas that are sort of in this hook maneuver around threatening then Suja at the moment, as also up in the north. In addition, secured serious positions of the Novenki forest in Sumy. Operations continue along the border. I think this is the biggest threat here, that if Ukraine let this go, or Russia is able to push it back, that the forces then cross into Sumy, and at a negotiation, that would be catastrophic. Let's look what Surik says. As negotiations between Ukraine and the US begin, events in Kursk accelerated. The Russian army began to enter Sumy, cut off the main supply route to the Ukrainian army on Russian territory. In addition, Russian forces began to reduce the northern salient, leaving Ukrainian-controlled territory at less than 400 square kilometres, a far cry from the nearly 1,000 square kilometres achieved by Ukrainian forces in August 24. One of Russia's main preconditions for assessing more serious peace negotiations will be the recovery of Kursk salient, which could happen in the spring of 2025. But if the Russians have said, well, we're just going to take it back militarily, that sort of takes the Ukrainian card off the table here. Because if they say, well, we'll just continue militarily until we take it back, what Ukraine is hoping to do is that not happen and actually just swap it back. So if they do choose to move forces, and maybe this is why we're seeing expansion of control in Pokrovsk and maybe Toretsk, but up there is going to be a big, big problem. Again, this is what the Russians can do in a more holistic view of war, is that we're happy to lose area here and gain this back, especially with the comments that Trump has made. So let's look at Toretsk. So we see on this, the grey zone looking more like the blue recovered areas on here. On both the south and the north, it's looking like Ukraine has recovered them territory. And Shurik saying, situation Toretsk, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced complete capture of Toretsk and many troops were relocated to other fronts without having secured the outskirts. As a result, during the last 3 days, Ukrainian army infiltrated back into the city and recaptured a significant part of Toretsk. This Telecon and half of the district have been recaptured. There was also a Ukrainian advance in this district on the outskirts of the 12th district. During the last hours, Russian army sent reinforcements and started to recapture some positions around the stadium and Rusby Avenue. The battle for the city continues, and I think we'll see a lot of here. I have seen a lot of pages, both Russian and Ukrainian, saying because of just a level of destruction on the outskirts here, there's nowhere to fucking entrench, to hold. Toretsk cannot be secured by the Russians without the capture of the Telecon. Ukrainian forces continue to launch attacks and infiltrate through them. This has been a serious mistake by those in command on this front and may again lead to prolonged urban fighting and the postponement of an offensive towards Konstantinivka. So, of course, a further northwestern push from then Toretsk. So let's come down into Pokrovsk, and we're looking around this sector in here. Again, when I talk maps and some things, ignore what I've named them in my folder. It's more to remind me or the time to talk about things. Okay, so we're talking about this front down in here. during the last 3 days, Russia made new advances southwest of Nadayevka. So pushing out, let's have a look, on just this front into this sector in here. So nothing too major. Pokrovsk has really slowed down, if not recovery of ground by the Ukrainian forces. But Legends, of course, today may have been a historic moment and maybe has sealed the fate for how this war is going to go. Again, what I say is things are not fair in love and war. And nuclear superpowers can just act differently than countries of which are completely reliant on them. I think a good example of this was, of course, Mongolia should have arrested President Putin when he came. Mongolia sits in between China and Russia. Is that really going to happen? I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying that Zelensky, him saying, well, this is unfair, that this is happening. I'm not saying that that is wrong, but what I'm saying is you can say that it's wrong, but saying that it's wrong and trying to uphold this virtue of this, thinking that's going to win wars, which Europe is doing, I think Europe should be copping more flack than they are. I think more people should be looking going, well, you fucking said this. You said you're with us to the end. Can we have another artillery system? Can we have one of your Patriots sitting around here? Again, a lot of problems in this. And if America withdraw support, especially that soft support, fucking strap in. Okay, Legends, you have a great day and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.